Story 1. Am I the asshole for telling my sister her wedding was ridiculous? To really understand where I'm coming from with this story, you have to know a little bit about my family. We're not a rich family, but we're close-knit. My parents are the classic hard-working couple. Dad was a mechanic, and Mom worked at a small grocery store for years. They saved and scrimped where they could, always prioritizing as kids, my sister Lisa and me, over themselves. Every birthday, every milestone, they'd do whatever they could to make sure we had what we needed. They always promised us that, no matter what, they'd help us with our weddings. It was their big contribution, and for as long as I can remember, they'd put aside a little bit here and there for that purpose. Lisa and I are pretty different. While I ended up taking the more traditional route, college, career, a steady relationship, Lisa was always the creative, off-the-beaten-path type. Growing up, she loved dinosaurs more than anything. And I'm not just talking about watching Jurassic Park. She could name every species, spot facts about the Mesozoic era, and drag our parents to every dino-related museum exhibit. It was charming as a kid, but she never really grew out of it. Even as an adult, she collected dinosaur figurines, her apartment was full of fossils and models, and she still attended paleontology lectures on weekends. Fast forward a few years, and Lisa meets a guy who's, surprisingly, just as into dinosaurs as she is. I'll call him Jake. They hit it off immediately, and I mean, they're perfect for each other. Quirky, a little eccentric, and both fully committed to their shared love of paleontology. Honestly, I was happy for her. It's rare to find someone who gets you on that level. Within a year, they were engaged, and that's when the chaos started. Lisa's wedding plans were unique. When she first told us she wanted a dinosaur-themed wedding, I thought, alright, that could be cute. Maybe a few dino-themed decorations or a fun cake topper. But as the months went on, it became clear this was no casual theme. It was a full-blown, over-the-top production. The wedding venue. A rented-out museum with a life-size T-Rex skeleton right in the middle of the hall. The invitations. Shaped like fossilized dinosaur bones, and if you touched them, they roared. I'm not kidding, they made actual roaring sounds. The bridesmaids' dresses were in various shades of prehistoric earth tones, and the groomsmen were supposed to wear bow ties with little dino prints. The cake. A 5-tier monstrosity sculpted to look like a volcano, complete with smoke effects and a herd of triceratops scaling the sides. Now, here's where things got sticky. This wedding wasn't cheap, far from it. And while Jake's family pitched in a bit, most of the financial burden was falling on my parents. My parents, who had modest savings and were already close to retiring, were covering the bulk of the cost. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. And the wedding just kept getting more elaborate. I started getting concerned when they had to dip into their retirement savings to make ends meet for Lisa's big day. One night, a few weeks before the wedding, I was at my parents' house, and I overheard them talking about taking out a loan to cover the final costs. That was the last straw for me. I couldn't stand by and watch them sacrifice their financial security for a wedding that seemed, frankly, more like a theme park attraction than a marriage celebration. I pulled Lisa aside the next day. I tried to be gentle about it, but I told her flat out, look, Lisa, I know this wedding is your dream, but you're asking Mom and Dad to pay for something that's just over the top. It's not fair to them. They're practically draining their savings for this. Have you thought about toning it down? She looked at me like I just insulted her entire existence. What are you talking about? She snapped. This is our wedding, and it's going to be amazing. Mom and Dad want to do this for me. I didn't back down. I told her I understood it was her dream wedding, but at what cost? I asked her if she was okay with our parents risking their financial future just to fund her over-the-top wedding. That's when she completely lost it. She accused me of being jealous. She said I didn't support her and that I was trying to ruin her special day. She told me I was selfish for making it about money and that I should be happy for her. I tried to explain that I was only looking out for Mom and Dad, but she wouldn't hear it. She stormed out, and for the next week, she wouldn't speak to me. I thought maybe it would blow over, but the tension was palpable at every family gathering. Eventually, my parents caught wind of the conversation, and they were upset not at Lisa, but at me. They said I shouldn't have stressed her out so close to the wedding, that they could handle it, and that this was their gift to her. I started second-guessing myself. Was I really being selfish? Was I overstepping by trying to control how much they were spending? I didn't think so, but it sure felt like I was the only one who saw things that way. Now the wedding is just around the corner, and Lisa's still barely speaking to me. Am I the asshole for telling my sister her wedding was ridiculous? Story 2. Am I the asshole for making my wife leave our friend's party early? So my wife, Sarah, and I have been married for about 4 years now. We've got a pretty good thing going. She's my best friend, and we usually see eye to eye on most things. But we're different in one big way. She's a social butterfly, and well, let's just say I'm more of a homebody. Sarah loves going out, hanging with friends, and just generally being the life of the party. And she's great at it. People love her energy. Me, I'm more of the quiet guy at the back of the room. I don't mind going out every now and then, but after a couple of hours, I usually start fading. I get tired, drained from all the socializing, and just want to go home and relax. So, you can imagine how the dynamic sometimes causes a bit of friction. This particular night, one of Sarah's good friends was throwing a party. It was supposed to be a laid-back affair, nothing too crazy, just a few friends, some drinks, some music, the usual. Sarah was pumped. She'd been talking about it for days, and even though I wasn't particularly excited, I knew it was important to her, so I decided to go along. We get to the party, and right away, Sarah is in her element. She's chatting with everyone, making people laugh, playing the perfect hostess even though it's not her party. I'm hanging back, talking to a few people, and it's fine. I'm not miserable or anything, but after about 2 hours, I'm starting to feel it. The music's getting louder, the drinks are flowing, and people are starting to get a little rowdier. Sarah's had a few drinks by this point, more than usual. And she's having a great time. She's laughing, dancing, and just letting loose. I'm happy for her, but at the same time, I'm getting a little worried. She's normally pretty responsible when it comes to drinking, but tonight she's on a roll. And the thing is, when Sarah drinks a little too much, she can get, well, a bit clumsy. And I don't just mean knocking over a glass. She gets a little wobbly, starts losing her balance, and has a tendency to embarrass herself in ways she regrets the next day. At one point, she's dancing in the living room with a couple of friends, and she trips over her own feet. She doesn't fall or anything, but she stumbles pretty hard and catches herself on the arm of the couch. That's when I start thinking maybe it's time to go. I walk over and quietly suggest that maybe we should head out. I'm trying to be subtle about it, you know. I don't want to embarrass her in front of everyone, but I also don't want to stay too late and risk her doing something she'll regret. But she's not having it. Come on, I'm fine. She laughs. I'm just having fun, don't be such a killjoy. Now, I get it, nobody wants to be told to leave a party when they're in the middle of having a good time. So I back off for a bit. But about 20 minutes later, she's even more tipsy. She's slurring her words slightly and tripped again, this time knocking over someone's wine glass onto the rug. I can see some of the other guests starting to notice, and I'm worried it's only going to get worse. So I go up to her again and say, "Babe, seriously, let's go. You're gonna hate yourself tomorrow if we don't." She gets angry this time. Like, really angry. She accuses me of trying to control her, of being a buzzkill, and says that I'm ruining her night. I'm taken aback because I'm just trying to look out for her, but I can see this turning into a full-blown argument if we stay. So I insist, and she reluctantly agrees to leave, but the entire drive home is silent. And when we get home, she slams the door and goes straight to bed without saying a word to me. The next day, she's cold. She won't talk to me unless I initiate, and when I do, it's short answers, and I can tell she's still upset. Eventually, I bring it up and try to explain that I wasn't trying to ruin her night, I was just worried about her. I told her I didn't want her to wake up regretting anything or embarrassed by how things went down at the party. She told me that I embarrassed her. That by making her leave, I made her look like she couldn't handle herself, and now she feels like all our friends are going to think she's irresponsible. She said I should have just let her have fun and that if she wanted to stay out, that was her choice. I feel like I was just trying to look out for her, but now I'm second-guessing everything. Was I being controlling? Should I have just let her enjoy the night, even if it meant things got messy? Am I the asshole for making my wife leave the party early? Story 3. Am I the asshole for refusing to sell my late father's car to my brother? My dad was a car guy. I mean, not just someone who liked cars, but someone who lived and breathed them. From as far back as I can remember, our weekends together were spent out in the garage, him showing me how to do little fixes here and there on his projects. You see, it wasn't just any car that was his favorite, it was his 1967 Chevy Impala. This car wasn't just his hobby, it was his obsession. He worked on that car for years, pouring every spare dollar, every free minute, into restoring it to its original beauty. I'm talking about late nights spent hunched over the engine, weekends polishing the chrome until it shone like a mirror. It was more than just a car, it was his legacy. Growing up, I knew how important that car was to him, and it became important to me, too. We'd spend hours in the garage, with him teaching me everything from changing the oil to adjusting the carburetor. It was in those moments that we really bonded. He wasn't always the best at talking about feelings, but in that garage, working on that car, we had an unspoken understanding. My younger brother, Derek, wasn't like that. He was never into cars. While I was out in the garage with Dad, Derek was off playing sports or hanging out with his friends. It wasn't that he didn't care about Dad, but they just didn't have the same connection. Dad tried to get Derek interested, but it just wasn't his thing. I always thought Derek was fine with that. We had different relationships with Dad, and that was okay. When Dad passed away last year, it was sudden. A heart attack, completely out of the blue. He was only 65, still young enough that we thought we had more time with him. And suddenly, he was gone. It felt like the rug had been ripped out from under us. Grieving was hard, but one thing that helped me through it was knowing I had the Impala. Dad and I had talked about it for years. When the time came, the car would be mine. It wasn't in the will or anything formal like that, but it was understood between us. That car was part of my connection to him, and after he died, it became even more important to me. Every time I look at it, I feel like he's still with me. So you can imagine my surprise when, a few months ago, Derek comes over for dinner, and out of the blue, he asks if I'm willing to sell the Impala to him. At first, I thought he was joking. Derek had never shown any interest in the car before. But no, he was serious. "Come on, man," Derek says. "You're not even driving it. I'll buy it from you, fair price. The kids would love riding around in it on weekends. Now, I'll admit, I don't drive the Impala a lot. It's not my daily driver, it's more of a sentimental piece, something I take out once in a while. But it's mine. It's not just a car to me, it's Dad." I told Derek that. "You know Dad wanted me to have the car," I said. "It's not for sale." I tried to explain it to him, but Derek wasn't having it. He started saying that I was being selfish, that I was hoarding the car just to let it sit in the garage, and that he could put it to better use. He even threw in the Dad would have wanted it argument, which honestly pissed me off. Dad wanted the car to be taken care of, I snapped. "I'm taking care of it. That doesn't mean selling it off to whoever wants to take their kids for a spin." Derek got heated. He accused me of being unreasonable, said I was stuck in the past, and that I needed to let go. He made this whole argument about how his kids, my niece and nephew, deserved to enjoy the car, too. It was like he was trying to guilt-trip me into selling it by bringing them into it. But I stood firm. I told him again that the car wasn't for sale and that this conversation was over. He left angry that night, and we didn't talk for a couple of weeks. I thought maybe he'd let it go, but boy, was I wrong. A few weeks later, my mom calls me. She says Derek's been talking to her, complaining that I'm being selfish and that I should consider selling him the car. She tells me that Derek's kids are really excited about the idea of having the car, that they've been talking about it nonstop, and that it would mean a lot to them. Now I'm starting to feel like the villain in this whole situation. It's one thing to have a disagreement with Derek, but having my mom involved, and using the kids as part of the argument, that's a whole different level of guilt. But here's the thing, this isn't just about the car. It's about what the car represents. It's about the memories, the connection I had with Dad, and how I'm still grieving. Selling the car feels like selling a piece of my relationship with him, and I'm not ready for that. I tried explaining this to Mom, but she didn't really get it. She just kept saying, "It's just a car, honey. Don't let this come between you and your brother." But it's not just a car. It's the last thing I have of Dad, the last tangible piece of him. It's the hours we spent together in the garage, the way his eyes would light up when he talked about restoring it, the way he'd hand me a wrench and say, "Now, don't screw this up." Now Derek and I aren't talking much. He's not outright avoiding me, but there's this tension that wasn't there before. Family gatherings are awkward. He gives me these sideways looks like I'm the bad guy in all of this. And maybe I am. Maybe I'm holding onto the car for the wrong reasons. But the thought of letting it go feels like letting go of Dad, and I'm just not ready to do that. So, am I the asshole for refusing to sell the car to my brother? Should I just suck it up and let it go, or is it okay for me to hold on to something that means so much to me? Story 4. Am I the asshole for refusing to move out so my roommate's boyfriend can move in? For context, I've been living with my roommate, Megan, for about 2 years now. We met in college freshman year, dorm roommates. We hit it off right away, and when we both graduated, we decided to rent an apartment together. At first, it was perfect. Megan and I have a similar vibe. We're both pretty chill, we like the same TV shows, we even cook dinner together sometimes. Honestly, it felt like living with a best friend. We had a great dynamic. Enter Todd. Megan started dating Todd about 6 months ago. At first, I thought he was fine. Kind of obnoxious, but not in a deal-breaker kind of way. You know the type, always a little too loud, always making jokes that weren't as funny as he thought they were. But whatever, it wasn't my relationship, and Megan seemed happy, so I stayed out of it. But then Todd started spending more and more time at our place. At first, it was just a couple of nights a week, and I didn't think much of it. But then a couple of nights turned into almost every night. It was like he moved in without actually moving in, if you know what I mean. Todd would be there when I got home from work, sprawled out on the couch with his shoes off, watching TV, eating snacks, leaving his mess all over the place. And I'm not talking about just the occasional mess, I mean full-on leaving dirty plates on the coffee table, shoes kicked off wherever, and don't even get me started on the bathroom. I tried to bring it up to Megan a couple of times, casually at first. "Hey, is Todd staying here more?" I'd ask. And she'd kind of brush it off. "Yeah, he's just been crashing here more lately," she'd say. No big deal, right? But then one night, things escalated. It was a Friday night, and I had planned a quiet evening for myself. Long week at work, I just wanted to unwind, maybe watch a movie, order some takeout. I get home, and Todd's there. Not just there, but he's invited a few of his friends over, and they're all hanging out in the living room, loud as hell, beers in hand, acting like it's their place. I was livid. I pulled Megan aside and told her, "Look, I didn't sign up for this. Todd's basically living here, and now he's inviting his friends over without asking. This isn't okay." Megan apologized, said she'd talked to him, and things calmed down for about a week. The final straw came about a month ago. Megan sits me down and says she has something to talk to me about. I'm thinking she's finally going to acknowledge the Todd situation and maybe suggest some boundaries. But no. What she says blows my mind. I was thinking, she starts, "Todd and I have been talking, and we think it'd be better if he moved in. And you, well, we're kind of hoping you'd be okay with moving out." I was stunned. I stared at her, trying to process what she just said. They wanted me to move out. I had been here for 2 years. This was my apartment just as much as it was hers. "Are you serious?" I asked. "You want me to move out so your boyfriend can move in?" She nodded, as if this was the most reasonable request in the world. "It just makes sense," she said. "You're single, and Todd and I are getting more serious. We'd like to have the place to ourselves." I was furious, but I tried to keep my cool. "Megan, this is our apartment. We both signed the lease. I'm not just going to move out because you and Todd decided it'd be more convenient for you. If you guys want to live together, maybe you should be the ones finding a new place. But she didn't back down. She kept insisting that it was easier for me to move out since Todd basically lived there anyway. She even tried to guilt trip me, saying, "Come on, don't make this harder than it has to be. We're trying to build a future together, and you're just holding on to the past." Now, I'll admit, I probably could have handled it better, but at that point, I lost it. I told her that if she wanted to move in with Todd, they could find their own place, but I wasn't going anywhere. We both signed the lease, and unless she was prepared to pay me to leave, I wasn't moving out just because her relationship was getting serious. Since then, things have been tense. Megan and Todd are still practically living together, and I'm just there. It's awkward. Megan barely talks to me, and when she does, it's short and clipped, like she's annoyed that I'm still around. Todd doesn't even acknowledge me half the time. It's like I'm an unwelcome guest in my own apartment. So now I'm wondering, am I the asshole here? Should I just move out and let them have the place? Or am I right to stand my ground and refuse to be pushed out of my own home? Story 5. Am I the asshole for leaving my sister's wedding after she tried to relegate my husband to the back row? So, a little backstory. My sister Jenna and I have always had a complicated relationship. We were never particularly close growing up, but we weren't estranged or anything either. Just your standard sibling rivalry, really. We grew up in a pretty conservative family, and Jenna was always the golden child, straight as, involved in everything, and basically the apple of my parents' eyes. Me, I was more of the black sheep. I was rebellious, hung out with the wrong crowd in high school, and didn't follow the path my parents expected. But whatever, we were different people, and I'd made peace with that. Anyway, fast forward to adulthood, I meet my husband, Matt. Now, Matt's a great guy, but I won't sugarcoat it, he's had a rough past. He was in and out of trouble when he was younger, got mixed up with the wrong people, but he turned his life around. He's been clean for years, he's got a stable job, and we've been married for 3 years now. He's honestly the best thing that's ever happened to me. The problem? My family doesn't really like him. They've never explicitly said it, but I can tell they judge him for his past. My parents are polite to him, but distant. Jenna, on the other hand, has made her disdain pretty clear over the years with snide comments and passive-aggressive digs at family dinners. "You sure you want to be with someone who's been to prison?" she'd say with this condescending smirk. I usually let it slide because I don't want to cause drama, but it's been hard. Anyway, Jenna's wedding was coming up, and I was, of course, invited. But things started to get weird when I noticed that my husband's name wasn't on the invitation. It was just my name. I called Jenna and asked her if it was a mistake, and she was like, "Oh, I figured Matt wouldn't want to come. I know how awkward it can be for him around the family." That was red flag number 1. I calmly told her that Matt would, in fact, be coming to the wedding because, he's my husband. She seemed annoyed but finally relented and said she'd add him to the guest list. Fine. I thought it was sorted. Now, we get to the day of the wedding. It's a huge event. Jen is marrying a guy from an old money family, so you can imagine the kind of wedding this was. Lavish decorations, hundreds of guests, the whole 9 yards. Matt and I show up, and when we get to the seating chart, I notice something strange. My name is at a table near the front with the immediate family, but Matt's name is at a table in the back. Literally, the furthest table from the action, stuck with distant relatives and people Jenna barely knows. I was furious. I pulled Jenna aside and asked her what the hell was going on. She played dumb at first, but then she admitted that she didn't think it was appropriate for Matt to be seated with the family because, in her words, his background might make people uncomfortable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her, Matt is my husband. If he's not welcome with me, then I'm not staying. She tried to backtrack, saying I was overreacting, that it wasn't a big deal, and that the seating arrangements were just complicated with so many guests. But I wasn't buying it. This wasn't about logistics, this was about her looking down on Matt, like she always had. So, I left. I grabbed Matt, told him we were leaving, and we walked out before the ceremony even started. Jenna was furious. She called me later, screaming about how I'd ruined her wedding, how I'd embarrassed her in front of everyone, and how I was making the day all about me. Even my parents got involved, telling me that I should have just let it go for Jenna's sake and that I'd been too dramatic. Now, I'm wondering, am I the asshole for leaving my sister's wedding over a seating arrangement? Should I have just sucked it up for the sake of peace, or was I right to stand up for my husband? Story 6. Am I the asshole for quitting the family business after my brother was made my boss? My family's business is our livelihood. It's an auto repair shop that's been in our family for over 40 years. My dad started it from scratch when he was a young man, and over time, it became a staple in our community. We've always been known for our honesty and good service, and the business was doing well, so well that when I was a teenager, it was always assumed I would work there full-time once I graduated high school. I did just that. I wasn't exactly the college type. I loved working with my hands, fixing cars, and helping people get back on the road. There was something fulfilling about taking something broken and making it run like new again. Dad was proud of me for following in his footsteps, and over the years, I learned every aspect of the business. I worked side by side with him, running the shop, expanding our client base, and even helping him manage the financials when he started to slow down. My younger brother Ethan was a different story. He was always more academic than I was, more ambitious in a different way. He went off to college, got a degree in business, and spent the next decade working in corporate jobs, living in different cities. For a long time, it seemed like Ethan had no interest in the family business at all. He came home for holidays, sure, but he never talked about joining the shop, never showed any interest in what we were doing. So, imagine my surprise when about a year ago, Ethan suddenly decided to move back home. He said he wanted to be closer to family and help out with the shop. Now, I was a little skeptical at first. Ethan's never been a gearhead like me or Dad, but I figured more help couldn't hurt, especially since Dad's health was declining. He was in and out of the hospital with heart issues, and I was running most of the day-to-day operations myself. At first, Ethan just observed. He'd hang around the shop, asking questions, watching me and the other mechanics work. But after a few weeks, he started making suggestions, small changes at first. He kept talking about how the shop was stuck in the past and needed to be modernized. He'd mention things like improving our online presence or streamlining our accounting system. I was open to that stuff. After all, I knew we could be more efficient in certain areas, but Ethan's ideas started feeling less like suggestions and more like ultimatums. We need to change the way we do customer intake, he said one day, as if it was a done deal. People don't want to wait around in the shop. We should set up an app where they can schedule appointments and get real-time updates on their cars. I tried to explain that our customers, the ones we've had for decades, preferred the personal touch. They liked coming in, chatting with us, and feeling like part of the family. But Ethan didn't care about that. He was convinced that modernizing the business meant turning it into something that looked more like the corporate world he had come from. I tried to be patient. After all, he had the business degree, and I figured maybe he did know something I didn't. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan didn't really understand what made our shop successful in the first place. This wasn't just a business to me, it was our family's legacy. It was the hours Dad and I spent together under the hood of a car, the relationships we built with customers who trusted us because we never ripped them off. It was our life. Then, a few months ago, Dad called a family meeting. He announced that he was officially retiring and stepping back from the business completely. We all knew this was coming. His health wasn't good enough for him to keep working, but what I didn't expect was what came next. Dad said that he'd been thinking long and hard about the future of the shop, and he had decided to hand over the reins to Ethan. Not me, Ethan. I felt like the ground had just fallen out from under me. I stared at my dad, trying to process what he just said. Ethan, the guy who had spent the past 10 years working in corporate offices, who hadn't even been back at the shop for a full year, was going to be in charge. Meanwhile, I'd spent the last 15 years of my life running the place, building relationships with clients, and keeping the shop afloat. I couldn't believe it. Dad, are you serious? I asked, my voice shaking. Ethan's barely been here a year. I've been running the shop for years. I know every customer, every part of this business inside and out. How can you put him in charge? Dad looked at me, his face lined with guilt, but he didn't back down. "Look, son," he said, "you've done an incredible job, and I'm proud of you. But Ethan has the business experience we need to take this shop to the next level. He can bring in new clients, help us grow in ways we haven't even thought about yet." I wanted to scream, to tell him that we didn't need to be some slick, corporate machine. We needed to keep being the reliable, trustworthy family business we'd always been. But I could see it in Dad's eyes, his mind was made up. He'd already given Ethan the keys. For the next few weeks, I tried to stick it out. I figured maybe I could work with Ethan, find some middle ground. But it quickly became clear that wasn't going to happen. Ethan came in like a bulldozer, making changes left and right without consulting me. He started restructuring the business, bringing in efficiency experts, and even talking about hiring a marketing team to rebrand the shop. The worst part was, the guys in the shop are mechanics, people I'd worked with for years, were starting to feel the strain. They didn't know where they fit in anymore, and neither did I. I wasn't even involved in the decision-making anymore. Ethan was the boss, and I was just there. The breaking point came when Ethan called me into his office, our dad's office, and told me that he was reassigning me to handle the parts inventory. Not operations, not management, but inventory. He was essentially demoting me to a glorified stock boy in the business I had spent my entire adult life building. That's when I walked out. I didn't say anything, didn't yell, didn't argue. I just turned around, grabbed my things, and left. I haven't been back since. Now, my family's furious with me. Dad says I'm overreacting, that I need to be a team player and work with Ethan for the good of the business. Ethan's been calling me nonstop, saying I'm being unprofessional and that I'm jeopardizing the future of the shop by refusing to cooperate. Even Mom's been on my case, telling me I need to put my ego aside and support my brother. But I can't help but feel like I've been betrayed. I gave my life to that shop, and now I'm being pushed out of my own family's business by my brother, who barely knows the first thing about it. So, am I the asshole for walking out? Should I have stayed and tried to make it work, or was I right to leave? Story 7. Am I the asshole for telling my adult daughter she can't move back home with her child? My daughter Emily is 26 years old. She has a 4-year-old son, Jamie, and she's been raising him on her own since he was born. Jamie's dad isn't in the picture. He bailed as soon as Emily told him she was pregnant, and we haven't heard from him since. Now, I love my daughter, and I love my grandson, but the past few years have been difficult, to say the least. Emily moved out of our house when she was 18, went to college, and got her degree. I was so proud of her for making it on her own, and for a while, she seemed to be doing really well. She had a good job, a nice apartment, and she seemed happy. But then she met Jamie's dad, and everything changed. They weren't together long before Emily got pregnant, and when he left, it hit her hard. I tried to be supportive, tried to help her through it, but she didn't want to move back home. She insisted that she could handle things on her own, so I helped in other ways, watching Jamie when she had to work, helping her out financially when things got tight. I wanted to give her space to figure things out, but I also didn't want her to feel like she was alone. Over the past few years, Emily struggled to make ends meet. She lost her job when her company downsized, and it's been one thing after another since then. She's bounced from job to job, but nothing has really stuck, and her financial situation has only gotten worse. I've helped her as much as I can, paying her rent when she's short, covering childcare costs, and giving her money for groceries when she's in a pinch. It's been a lot, but I've always told myself it was temporary, that she'd eventually get back on her feet. Then, about a month ago, Emily called me in tears. She said she'd lost her latest job, her landlord was evicting her, and she didn't know what to do. She asked if she and Jamie could move back home with me and my husband until she got back on her feet. Now, here's the thing, I love my daughter, but I've already been helping her for years. And at some point, I feel like she has to take responsibility for her life. My husband and I are nearing retirement age, and we've been looking forward to having some peace and quiet in our home after years of raising our own kids. We've already downsized into a smaller house, and there's not much room for a young child here. Plus, my husband has health issues, and the stress of having a toddler around all the time would be too much for him. I told Emily that I didn't think it was a good idea for her to move back home. I offered to help her find a more affordable apartment, and I even offered to pay for a few months' rent to give her some breathing room. But I was firm. I told her that she needed to find a solution that didn't involve moving back in with us. Emily was devastated. She accused me of abandoning her and Jamie when they needed me the most. She said I was being selfish and that I cared more about my own comfort than I did about helping my daughter and grandson. She even went as far as to say that I was punishing her for being a single mom, and that I didn't understand how hard it was to raise a child on her own. Her words cut deep, but I stood my ground. I told her that I would always be there to help, but that I couldn't keep bailing her out every time something went wrong. I explained that she needed to take responsibility for her life, for Jamie's sake as much as her own. I wasn't trying to be cruel, I just wanted her to realize that she couldn't rely on me forever. Since then, things have been tense between us. Emily found a place to stay with a friend for now, but she's barely speaking to me. When she does, it's short and cold, like she's still angry with me for not letting her move back home. I feel guilty, but I also know that I need to set boundaries. I can't be her safety net forever. So now, I'm wondering, am I the asshole for telling my adult daughter that she can't move back home with her child? Should I have let her stay with us, even though it would have been a strain on me and my husband, or was I right to set some boundaries? Story 8. Am I the asshole for backing out as the best man after I found out my fiancé wasn't invited? I've known Jake for as long as I can remember, since we were kids, actually. We grew up next door to each other, went to the same schools, and have been through thick and thin together. He's more like a brother to me than just a friend. Whether it was teaming up on a soccer field, navigating the awkwardness of high school, or sharing our dreams about the future, we were inseparable. So, when Jake asked me to be his best man for his upcoming wedding, I didn't hesitate for a second. I was honored, excited, and ready to do whatever it took to make his day perfect. At the time he asked me, I'd been dating my fiancée Sarah for about a year. Sarah's amazing, she's kind, funny, smart, and we just click. From our first date at that little Italian restaurant downtown to our lazy Sundays spent binge-watching our favorite shows, I knew she was the one. Jake met Sarah a few months into our relationship, and at first, he seemed to get along with her just fine. They exchanged jokes, laughed about our mutual love for pizza, and Sarah even joined us for a few game nights with the guys. As the wedding date drew closer, the excitement in the air was palpable. Jake had been planning this wedding for months, and he wanted everything to be perfect. He was marrying Lily, the love of his life, someone he'd known since high school. She was beautiful, sweet, and they seemed like a match made in heaven. I was thrilled for him, but I also started noticing some changes in Jake's demeanor. One evening, over a couple of beers, Jake brought up the guest list. He was a bit hesitant, as if he had something weighing on his mind. I jokingly asked him if he had a list of who's in and who's out. He chuckled but then turned serious. Actually, he said, looking down into his drink, I've had to make some tough decisions about the guest list. I want to keep it intimate, you know. Just family and a few close friends. I nodded, knowing that weddings could get out of hand if you let too many people in. That makes sense. It can be overwhelming. Then he dropped the bombshell, I'm not inviting Sarah. I blinked, stunned. What? Why not? She's my fiancée, man. You know how serious we are. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know. But it's a family thing. My parents are paying for most of the wedding, and they're really picky about who they want there. They've never liked Sarah. What? But they've met her. She's great. I protested. Yeah, but they don't see it that way. They think she's not good enough for me, that she's too casual, I guess. They don't like her lifestyle or how she dresses. It's stupid, but I want to keep the peace. I've got enough stress with planning this wedding. My heart sank. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jake and I had always been open and honest with each other, and here he was, allowing his parents to dictate who should be part of one of the most important days of his life. Look, man, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. You're the one getting married. This is your day, not your parents'. You can't just exclude someone I love because they have a different view of what's proper. Jake raised his hands defensively. I get it, but if I don't do this, my parents will make a scene, and I don't want to ruin my wedding day over this. It's not just about me, it's about Lily, too. I have to think about her feelings. We argued back and forth, but it quickly became clear that he had made up his mind. The conversation left me feeling frustrated and hurt. I didn't want to be caught in the middle of this family drama, especially when it involved Sarah. In the days leading up to the wedding, I found it hard to concentrate. I tried to push through the planning and activities, like the bachelor party and wedding rehearsals, but the weight of Jake's decision sat heavy on my heart. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was betraying Sarah by standing by while she was being excluded from something so monumental in my best friend's life. When I finally broached the topic with Sarah, her reaction was one of disappointment, not anger. She'd always been understanding about my friendships, but she also had her limits. I can't believe he would do that to you, she said softly, her eyes downcast. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be a burden on anyone. If I'm not welcome, maybe it's best if I stay away. My heart broke for her. She wasn't a burden, she was my partner, someone I wanted by my side through everything. I felt stuck, torn between my loyalty to Jake and my love for Sarah. As the wedding day approached, I had a decision to make. I could either go through with being Jake's best man and support him while knowing Sarah wasn't invited, or I could stand up for my relationship and back out. The night before the wedding, I called Jake and told him I needed to talk. We met at a bar, and I laid it all out on the table. I can't be your best man if Sarah isn't there, I said, my voice steady. I love her, and it doesn't feel right celebrating your big day while she's sitting at home feeling rejected. I won't be a part of this if she can't be there. Jake looked like I'd slapped him. You can't be serious. You're my best friend. This is one day. You're throwing away everything over this. Maybe I am, I replied, feeling a rush of emotions. But I can't support you while you're turning your back on someone I care about. You're letting your parents dictate your choices, and I can't just stand by and watch that happen. We ended up in a heated argument, and it felt like our lifelong friendship was crumbling before my eyes. I left the bar feeling like I'd made a terrible mistake, but also knowing that I had to stand by my principles. The next day, I woke up with a sense of dread. I knew I'd made my choice, but I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. I texted Jake, letting him know I wouldn't be attending the wedding. It was an awful feeling, like a knife to the gut. I spent the day with Sarah, trying to distract myself. We went for a hike, had lunch at our favorite cafe, but the whole time, I felt a mix of guilt and relief. The wedding happened without me, and I spent the evening checking my phone, waiting for updates. When I finally got a message from one of our mutual friends, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. Jake had made it through the ceremony, but tensions were high, and my absence was noticed. Jake didn't reach out immediately, but when he did, it was a mix of anger and confusion. I can't believe you chose her over me, he texted. You've ruined our friendship over this. You know how important today was to me. I felt my heart breaking all over again. I didn't choose her over you, Jake. I chose to stand by my values. I wish you could see how wrong this is. Since that day, things have been awkward between us. Jake has been distant, and I can't help but feel a heavy weight of guilt. I've tried reaching out, but he's either ignored my texts or replied with short messages, clearly upset. Meanwhile, Sarah has been supportive but sad about the fallout. Now I'm left wondering, am I the asshole for backing out as the best man after I found out my fiancé wasn't invited? Should I have just gone along with it for the sake of our friendship, or was I right to stand my ground for what I believe in? Story 9. Am I the asshole for telling my sister she can't bring her kids to my wedding? I recently got engaged to my amazing partner, Liam. From the very beginning of our relationship, we talked about how we wanted to celebrate our love when the time came. We envisioned a small wedding, just close friends and family, held in a beautiful garden that had special meaning for us. It was a place where we'd shared many picnics and long walks, and it felt like the perfect backdrop for our special day. When we sent out invitations, my sister Rachel immediately called me, excited but also with a slight hint of concern in her voice. She has 2 kids, Max, 5, and Ella, 3, and she assumed they would be welcome at the wedding. Now, I adore my niece and nephew. They are energetic, sweet, and full of life. However, Liam and I have always envisioned a kid-free wedding. We wanted an atmosphere that was relaxed and mature, where we could focus on each other and share an intimate experience with our adult friends and family. I hesitated at first, knowing how much Rachel loves her kids, but I calmly explained our reasoning. Rachel, we love Max and Ella, but we want to keep our wedding a bit more adult-focused. We just want it to be a day where everyone can relax and enjoy themselves without worrying about kids running around. Rachel's excitement quickly turned to frustration. What do you mean? My kids are part of the family. They should be able to be there on such a big day. Her voice was rising, and I could feel the tension growing between us. I tried to reason with her, explaining how we envisioned the day. I get that, but we've decided to keep it small and intimate. I promise we're going to have family gatherings where the kids can be included. I just can't imagine them at the wedding, causing chaos when we're trying to focus on each other. Rachel became defensive, saying I was being selfish and that I didn't understand how hard it was for parents to find childcare. You're telling me my kids aren't welcome because you want to have a perfect day. What about family? Don't they deserve to be there? Her words stung. I knew she was passionate about her children, but I felt like she was missing the point. Feeling overwhelmed, I said, look, we love them and we want to celebrate with them at other times. But for this day, it's really important to us to keep it an adult event. I thought you'd understand. The conversation escalated into an argument, and it ended with her saying, fine, but don't expect me to come without my kids. I hung up feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. I knew I had hurt her, but I also believed I was standing firm on my principles. As the wedding day approached, Rachel did not RSVP. I was devastated but also relieved because I didn't want the stress of worrying about kids at our wedding. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had hurt my sister and put a strain on our relationship. I tried to reach out to her several times leading up to the wedding, sending texts with simple phrases like, hope you're doing okay, or I miss you. Each time, she responded with short, curt replies that left me feeling even more unsettled. On the day of the wedding, everything went beautifully. The ceremony was emotional, the food was delicious, and Liam and I had an amazing time. We danced, laughed, and celebrated our love with the people who mattered most to us. But as I looked around and saw my family, I noticed Rachel was noticeably absent, and it left a bittersweet taste in my mouth. I felt happy but also guilty. After the wedding, I received a message from Rachel. She was furious and said I had ruined our relationship over a stupid wedding. She felt excluded and hurt that I didn't consider her family part of the day. She accused me of being insensitive and selfish. That stung. I thought about all the times I had been there for her during tough moments and how she didn't seem to recognize the love and effort behind my decision. I reached out again, trying to explain my feelings. Rachel, I love you, and it was never my intention to hurt you. I just wanted this day to be something special between Liam and me. But all my attempts felt futile. She wouldn't engage beyond surface-level conversations, and I felt like I had lost my sister over a decision that was meant to celebrate love. Now I'm left wondering, am I the asshole for telling my sister she can't bring her kids to my wedding? Should I have made an exception to keep the peace, or was I right to set boundaries? Story 10. Am I the asshole for not wanting to babysit my sister's kids on my only day off? I work a demanding job at a marketing firm that often requires long hours and high levels of commitment. My days are filled with back-to-back meetings, tight deadlines, and creative brainstorming sessions. By the time I clock out on Fridays, I'm utterly exhausted and in desperate need of some time to recharge. Every Saturday, I treat myself to a self-care day, the day where I can finally catch up on sleep, indulge in my favorite hobbies, or simply enjoy the silence of my apartment. It's my only day off from the relentless grind of work, and I cherish it. I look forward to these moments like a child waiting for Christmas morning. However, my younger sister, Megan, has a very different understanding of my Saturdays. She has 2 small kids, Lily, who is 5, and Jake, who is 3. Megan works as a part-time waitress, and her schedule is often erratic, which means she relies on me for childcare more often than I'd like to admit. A couple of weeks ago, Megan called me in a panic on a Friday evening. "Hey, I know it's last minute, but can you babysit the kids tomorrow? I have to pick up an extra shift at the restaurant, and I can't find anyone else." I felt the familiar sense of dread wash over me. "Megan, I can't tomorrow. It's my only day off, and I really need to rest," I said gently but firmly. Her voice turned cold. "You can't just ditch me like this. I don't have anyone else to turn to. I thought family was supposed to help each other out." That hit me hard. I love my sister and her kids, but I felt resentful of the expectation that I should drop everything whenever she needed help. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I really need this day for myself. I promise I'll be available next weekend if you need me," I offered, hoping to find a compromise. But Megan wasn't having it. "You always say that. You're too busy with your self-care to think about anyone else. Do you even care about your niece and nephew?" Her accusation stung, and I felt anger bubble up. "Of course I care. But I'm not a substitute parent, and I can't be there for you every time you need a break." The conversation spiraled into a heated argument. Megan accused me of being selfish and distant, while I tried to express that my mental health mattered too. "You don't understand how exhausting my job is. I can't just put my life on hold whenever you call," I said, frustration boiling over. After we hung up, I felt a mix of guilt and anger. I knew I should be more supportive, but I also felt like I was being taken advantage of. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, wondering if I was really the bad guy for wanting to protect my own time. The next day, I woke up to a barrage of text messages from Megan. They ranged from angry to desperate. "I'll make it up to you. I'll take you off for lunch. Just please come help me." She even sent pictures of Lily and Jake, looking so innocent and sweet, begging for their aunt. I thought about it long and hard. Could I really leave them hanging? But then I imagined my Saturday slipping away, filled with stress and chaos, and I felt my resolve harden. I ignored the messages and spent the day taking care of myself as planned, reading, meditating, and enjoying a long bath. But the following week, Megan confronted me in person. "You know, it's really disappointing that you chose yourself over your family. You're missing out on a lot of precious moments with your niece and nephew. They need you." Her words stung more than I expected. "I need to prioritize my mental health too, Megan. I can't be your safety net every time you need help," I replied, trying to remain calm. "Then maybe you shouldn't be surprised when they grow up not knowing who their aunt is." She shot back, tears in her eyes. That was a low blow, and it made me rethink everything. I loved those kids fiercely, but was I really being selfish? As the days went by, I found myself torn between wanting to help my sister and protecting my own sanity. Finally, I decided to reach out to her. "Megan, I've been thinking. I'm sorry if I came off as selfish. I do want to be there for you and the kids, but I need to find a better balance. Can we come up with a plan where I can help more regularly so you're not feeling so overwhelmed?" Megan's response was softer this time. "I'd really appreciate that. I didn't mean to lash out, I'm just struggling. Thank you for reaching out." We talked through it, and I agreed to babysit once a month, along with an occasional Saturday. It felt like a compromise, and while I was still nervous about the future, I also felt a sense of relief. Maybe we could find a way to support each other after all. Now, I'm left wondering, am I the asshole for not wanting to babysit my sister's kids on my only day off? Was it wrong to prioritize my own mental health? Story 11. Am I the asshole for not attending my friend's wedding because I dislike her fiancé? My friend Nina and I have been best friends for years. We've been through everything together, breakups, new jobs, and even moving across the country for our dreams. When Nina met Jake, I was excited for her at first. He seemed charming and sweet, and I wanted her to be happy. But as time went on, I started to notice some red flags. Jake would often make sarcastic comments about Nina's choices, belittling her passions and dreams. At first, I thought it was just teasing, but it started to feel more malicious. He was often dismissive and acted like he was better than her, which made me uncomfortable. The more I observed, the more my concern grew. I tried to bring it up casually during our hangouts. "Nina, do you ever feel like Jake puts you down? I just worry he doesn't appreciate you the way you deserve." She brushed off my concerns, saying he was just joking. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was ignoring a toxic relationship. When Jake proposed, I felt a knot in my stomach. She was over the moon, of course, and I feigned excitement to support her. However, I couldn't shake my concerns about their future together. A few weeks before the wedding, she invited me to coffee to talk about her upcoming plans. I sensed something was off as she nervously played with her hands. "I just wanted to ask if you're excited about the wedding," she said, a bright smile plastered on her face. But when I looked closely, I could see the underlying worry in her eyes. "I am, but I've been thinking a lot about you and Jake," I admitted. "Are you sure you're making the right choice? You deserve someone who lifts you up, not someone who makes you feel small." Her expression darkened, and I knew I had crossed a line. "Why do you always have to make everything about Jake? I love him, and you need to support me, not tear me down." That hit hard. I hadn't meant to upset her, but I felt that I had a responsibility to speak up. In my mind, I was being a good friend, but she saw it as interference. As the wedding day approached, I found myself dreading it. I didn't want to see Jake marry her. I didn't think he would make her happy. A week before the ceremony, Nina texted me the final details and reminded me of the dress code. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. I didn't want to be a part of a union I believed was wrong. The night before the wedding, I made a tough decision. I texted Nina, explaining that I wouldn't be able to attend. "I'm really sorry, but I have a family emergency that just came up. I won't be able to make it." The moment I sent it, guilt flooded in. I knew she'd be hurt, but I felt it was the only way to protect my own feelings. When the wedding day arrived, my phone buzzed with messages from Nina. She was upset and confused. "I can't believe you're not coming. You've been my best friend through everything, and now you're just ditching me." I wanted to respond, to explain my feelings, but I hesitated. My heart ached at the thought of disappointing her. I had been her support for years, and now it felt like I was abandoning her in a crucial moment. After a few hours of back and forth texting, she finally called me. "I need to hear from you. Why did you really bail on me?" I took a deep breath. "I just don't think Jake is the right person for you. I couldn't stand by and watch you marry someone who I believe will hurt you. It didn't feel right for me to be there and pretend to support it." There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her processing my words. "So, what? You think you're better than me for making this choice? I don't need your judgment right now. I need my best friend." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes. "I didn't mean to judge you, but I care about you, Nina. I'm worried for your happiness. You deserve someone who treats you right." Her voice softened, but the pain was evident. "You should have just come to support me. You're making this about yourself. I thought you were on my side." I felt like I was losing her, and it broke my heart. After the call, I felt conflicted. Did I do the right thing by voicing my concerns, or had I overstepped and lost my best friend in the process? Weeks passed after the wedding, and we hardly spoke. Nina seemed to be in a happy bubble, and I couldn't help but feel a mixture of anger and sadness. I sent her a message wishing her well, but she responded with a curt reply. "Thanks, I'm happy now. I wish you could have shared in that." It was painful to read. I knew I had to give her space, but the thought of losing her friendship stung. I spent nights replaying everything in my mind, wondering if I had been the asshole for choosing my values over our friendship. Eventually, I reached out one last time. "Nina, I'm really sorry for how things turned out. I love you and just want what's best for you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." She read the message, but the silence that followed felt heavy. As I sat there wondering if I had made a mistake, I asked myself, am I the asshole for not attending my friend's wedding because I dislike her fiancé? Was it wrong to prioritize my feelings over our friendship? Thank you for listening to Reddit Stories Vault. Make sure to subscribe if you liked this video. Our goal is to reach 1,000 subs by the end of the year, and you can help us.